Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the work session of the Westfield Washington School Board of Trustees to order. Thank you to our board members and administration for being here this evening. I'd also like to extend a special welcome to any guests joining us tonight and appreciate your time and interest in the district's work. This evening's session is an opportunity for us to review and discuss important items that will help move our district forward. And at this time, I will turn the meeting over to our superintendent, Dr. John Atha.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. In this work session, it's kind of a back to school, looking at things that are coming upon us in the next couple months. One of the things that we want to talk about first is last year the board adopted a switch in 27-28 from a trimester to a semester schedule. The work of figuring out that daily schedule still has to continue this fall, but we would like that to happen sooner rather than later. And so I'm going to ask Dr. Hoover to give us an update and a plan, and then see if there's any questions from the board, and maybe see from the board who wants to participate in that work.
Thank you, Dr. Atha. Members of the board, I just wanted to share kind of an update like Dr. Atha shared with you. You should have in front of you some notes on what the work that's been done up to this point. But ultimately, I wanted to point out a few key points of this. Really ultimately the goal of having some green days, gold days, and 87 to 90 minutes per group. Really, the biggest thing, most of this information has been shared with you, so I don't want to go back and reread all of it to you. I think the most important part is really at the bottom, the timeline. The official bell schedules will go to the board approval in November, but we want to basically have this for the next school year. I think more than anything, there's going to be a guiding coalition task force that works on the plan for core time, resource rooms, so forth. Similar to the redistricting process, I would love to have participation from the board on this committee, just because I think it would be great to have your guys' perspective and to keep you guys up to speed on this. But as you kind of go through this, we really just need to, there's some big things we need to talk about. Obviously, working with transportation is a huge piece, and that goes beyond any kind of schedule. That goes to more, really it speaks more of a district schedule, so that'll be a part of whatever we decide. As you guys are well aware, core time has been kind of a standard foundational piece of our high school schedule. That's something that we absolutely want to build in, but what does that look like? How will that be structured? We still want to talk about that. And then, teacher contract time, what that'll be. Will there be paid short prep each day? We just want to talk about some things that still have to be determined. So I think there's definitely some, I wouldn't say set in stone, but there's definitely some areas that, some parameters that I feel the committee thus far has said these are somewhat tight and we want to keep these. And then there's definitely some areas that the committee wants to continue to look at along with your guys' input. So the goal is over these next few months is to do that and then have a final plan ready to make a recommendation moving forward. But do you guys have any questions at all about anything that you've seen here with the calendar? And then if you kind of look, there is a kind of a one-pager that is going to be one of the things, not the only, but one of the visuals that we were going to share with parents. That's this document here. And really what we're trying to show more than anything is just, number one, the growth from nearly 2,400 students to almost 3,300 over the course of 7 years. And then also just the some of the reasonings on the advantages of different schedules, and then kind of how this came to be. So that I think the most important part that we've talked about with Alicia and her team is we don't want this to seem like this was an overnight decision, right? There are going to be, teachers and others that have had children go through, and this will be new. So we want to make sure that it's, it's highlighted in the why is explicit, as opposed to just, we're doing this. Now, I will tell you, if we wanted to, other things data-wise and so forth, you guys are well aware that the schedule that we're looking at going towards is much more common than the one that we're currently on. So that, there's much more data in the lens of why would we move into this. But I would tell you that time on task and instructional minutes is really a huge driving factor, and not giving up some of the benefits of what our current model of students being able to have a great deal of choice. And so we kind of feel like we have a great balance, and this will also allow us to meet a lot of the accountability standards in the new model that we discussed earlier. So, sorry. Any other questions or any thoughts?
Yeah, Dr. Hoover, could you speak to two things a little bit more? One relates to core time and what are the initial thoughts about how that would be retained? And then my other question relates to, with the new state requirement for the internships, how that might fall on, is there a idea of where that might fit on the green day or the gold day, or how that might look in a normal week and coordinate with
Sure.
employers?
No, and two great points. So I'll talk about the core piece first. I mean, as you guys can see, like one of the 8 periods would be a core time. As you guys well know, that's a time that we're using right now for students to have not just choice, but also some preference, and teachers to really have some dedicated work with specific students. I will say not all schools do this, but those that do, sometimes they have, I want to call it a homeroom, but some have similar type situations like this, where it's much more of a small group opportunity for students to have work done in different areas. Some could look at this as a part of, depending on what students are going to, it's really kind of an extension of their MTSS model, because it's going to allow students to have specific help in specific areas, or they're going to be able to do things of interest, and which is also a differentiated part of differentiated instruction. So we definitely know we want to do that. I think how do we build that in is still one of the big question marks. And there's no doubt about it that we'll come to that, which then kind of brings me to the next piece is, you're exactly right, in the internship piece. We're not too worried about building and how we build that in, but as far as there obviously is a change with, the Green Day, Gold Day, and so forth. And it's really going to be looking at it more across the entire year, as opposed to the nice thing about the current model is you had more flexibility with 3 tries than with 2, right? So it's just a matter of looking at, instead of maybe more times of more days but shorter times, looking at longer periods but less frequent, if that makes sense. I mean, that's really what you're switching to. There will be some things like, there's those little nuances like that we'll have to work through. But the good news is either model would allow us for internships, things like that. That's no longer a wish. That is now that we have to, that is a tight that we have to meet. And so that'll absolutely be built into either model, but into this model where students will just do that for longer periods of a time. So it could look like something where students might be doing more half days, like on one of the days versus the other, in their internship versus doing it like on an everyday type basis, things like that. Yeah, those bigger detail or smaller details like that, once we kind of formulate in our guiding coalition team on this, those are the things that we'll knock out. But core is absolutely, we fully intend to have that built into the schedule. You're welcome. Is there any other questions that I can help try to answer on that? This will be obviously more common, and it will be a big shift, but we're looking forward to having you guys be a part of that, if you'd like. Yep. You're welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Atha, members of the board. As Dr. Atha mentioned, the excitement of opening Westfield Middle School West at the start of next school year. So just as we did with the opening of the elementary schools and the movement of staff, we have a process. And the first step would be selecting the principal for our new middle school. So just want to go through the timeline that we have established as a tentative timeline and our plans for that. We were planning to post the position with the job description at the end of September. So about the third week of September, around September 24th, we'll prepare and we'll post that position. For the next 2 weeks up through October 9th, our plan would be to recruit, advertise, recruit qualified candidates, answer any questions, monitor the applications, continue to look for some great candidates that I'm sure will apply for wanting to come to Westfield Schools to be a part of our family. At that point, around October 12th, we will review the resumes and the applications to see if they meet the qualifications or the standards that we're looking for. Then we would look to around October 19th, conducting those first steps in the interview process, which involve a screening interview, phone interview, a screening interview that would be done by myself and the assistant superintendents here at central office, and then also do some in-person interviews to narrow that large pool, hopefully a large pool of candidates down to a smaller group, and try to get down to 3 to 4 finalists prior to fall break would be our goal. And then after fall break, the plan would be to, and just as we have, following the same process we've used in the past, which has been successful, include the staff members at the middle school, community members, parents, our central office staff, admin team, to have that comprehensive final interviews, looking at those groups and having those final candidates go through that. After that, based on that feedback, hopefully narrowing it down to at least 1 or 2 final candidates that we would follow up on, reference checks, any background checks, with the plan then around November 16th to hopefully extend a conditional offer that would be done by Dr. Atha as the superintendent, with all of the information that we've acquired through the many weeks of the selection process. And then our hope would be to bring a candidate to you as a board at the December 8th meeting of the school board for final approval and introduction to everybody at that point. After that, then we would announce it to the middle school staff. We'd like to make sure we put some things in place to have the middle school staff meet the new principal, with knowing that that's important for people when they decide and fill out the survey for where they'd like to go and what they'd like to teach the following year. So we'll follow that same process that we used for redistributing the elementary staff. We'll do the same thing for the middle school staff, where they'll have a survey to fill out to give that information. Then I'll use that information to place them in the 2 middle schools. And that would happen, finalized hopefully sometime in January, with the survey being completed, and then using the time through, and hopefully announced by the end of February where they would be, as kind of the tentative timeline. That could change, obviously, as we go through this process, depending on who is selected and what their timeline is for starting with us, and how much of that we can get to make sure that middle school staff can meet them and be comfortable with that person before they make that final decision. So again, that's the tentative timeline that we look and have a plan to be very comprehensive, and a lot of rounds of interviews and information that we acquired. It's a very important selection that we have, but we want to make sure we include as many people as possible in the process to have ownership in, and help that person get off on the right foot when they start with us. So open any questions you might have.
All right, thank you, Dr. Baldwin. And next up, the all-important budget adoption timeline. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Hunt, our Assistant Superintendent of Business Operations, to lay out. We finally got certified net assessed evaluation, so and we're approaching the October 1 count date, but he can start talking to you about building the budget for the school year.
It's absolutely correct. Thank you, Dr. Atha. Good evening, members of the board. This evening, what I really wanted to do is kind of give a high-level overview of where we're at as far as the budget process is concerned, lay out the timeline or the calendar for the 2027 budget. What I want to start with is on June 30th, there was a deadline for the school district to submit their pre-budget worksheet to the Department of Local Government Finance through a gateway that was completed. And then, like Dr. Atha said, around August the 5th, we received our report on our net assessed valuation, or certified net assessed valuation for the 2027 school year. I do want to report to the board that as far as our operations fund, our debt service fund, so what would be the non-exempt portion of the net assessed valuation, we had an increase. It was a slight increase of 1.53% from the previous year. But to put things into perspective from a historical standpoint, I'll go back to 2026. So from 2025 to 2026, our non-exempt net assessed valuation grew by 8.36%. And our exempt portion, which when we talk about the exempt portion, that includes the capital referendum as well as the operating referendum. So that percentage grew by 9.33%. And so when we did receive our net assessed valuation, and again, the non-exempt portion was 1.56% as an increase, and our exempt portion grew by 3.56%. And again, significantly lower than the previous year, but I keep that in mind because this is what we use, those certified net assessed valuation, again, as a basis in which to build our budgets as far as our operations, debt service, and referendum funds are concerned. During the months of July and August, started working with our different departments within the school district to start to get what is needed across the district. So again, it's a starting point to build the budget as we go into 2027. And then on September the 11th, this is a magic date as far as the advertisement is concerned. So we, again, by state statute, we have to advertise the budget at least 10 days prior to the budget hearing. I always say this because as I started off in this position several years ago, we always had to advertise in the newspaper. Again, just a reminder to the board that this advertisement does not occur in the newspapers. It is actually in Gateway, and it is also posted on our corporation website as far as the budget hearing is concerned. And part of that is the Form 3 notice to the taxpayers. Again, that's the legal advertisement. Again, that's on Gateway, and it will be on our website. In addition to that, we also have to post the bus replacement plan. So it's the 5-year bus replacement plan as well as the capital projects plan. Those all have to be posted on our website and in Gateway as well. And then on September the 22nd, that is when we would have a work session, but that would also be the budget hearing. Again, we set this aside as far as a work session is concerned because the presentation does take some time, and we want to make sure that we cover all the bases as well as allow any time for any questions during that time. But then again, the budget hearing would be open. Again, that's September the 22nd. On October the 13th, that would be the October normal board meeting. That would be where the board would be asked to approve the budget. And at that time, the next day on October 14th, we would submit that budget. Again, I go back to Gateway. It's that portal for the Department of Local Government Finance in which we submit all documentation for the 2027 budget. And then December, we would wait. And at that point is when the Department of Local Government Finance, they have to, statutorily speaking, have that to us before the end of the calendar year. And so that would be the 1782 notice. The 1782 notice is actually not the certification of the budget, but it's actually the draft copy. We would then review and make any adjustments that would need to be made and then submit back to the Department of Local Government Finance. And then after that time, again in January, you would wait for that certification of the budget. One of the other factors that I wanted to mention too, which was a change from the previous year, because the law reverted back, and there is a growth portion that is built into what is the maximum levy growth quotient. And so the maximum levy growth quotient is a percentage that, again, statutorily speaking, that a school district may increase the levy, the tax levy, by that particular percentage, or in dollar amounts based upon that particular percentage. We are looking at a 10% increase to the maximum levy growth quotient, and the state is actually at 6%. But because there are a few districts across the state that now, again, there's some components that are built in for growing districts, that was built in. But the one caveat to the maximum levy growth quotient we have to be cognizant of is, again, any of the impacts from circuit breaker. So you may be able to increase your levy by the 10%, but as far as what we would actually net out, as far as revenue is concerned, would be less than that based upon any of the circuit breaker impact or any of the tax credit impacts that are associated with that. And so at this time, I would open it up if there's any questions that the board would like for me to entertain.
So you're saying that we can now utilize 10% since we're a growing district?
We can, and so the Department of Local Government Finance, it comes out and they basically have sent out to all of the school districts, and we can see all the districts across the state. It's in a spreadsheet format. That is, it shows the percentage of the maximum levy growth quotient. Again, for the state, it's 6%, but for us, again, because of some of the factors of us as a growing district, we are actually reported that our maximum levy growth quotient for our district would be 10%. Yes.
On the gateway, if I wanted to go on and look at that, or if somebody out in the public wanted to look at that, what would they Google
Sure.
to get to that gateway?
It's really easy. It's Indiana Gateway, Gateway. So if you Google Indiana Gateway, and again, it is a portal for the entire state of Indiana. And so if you're looking for, let's say, what is the 2027 certified net assessed valuation, you're able to go to Gateway. You can do a search for any of the districts. You have to obviously drill down to a particular district that you would be looking for. And it's not just school districts, it's also any municipalities that are associated with the Department of Local Government Finance. So if you're looking for any of, again, the assessed valuations that are associated with any of those particular units, you're able to do a search within Gateway. And so you can do report searches on Gateway. So there's a number of different things. Again, it's an access point for any of the citizens in the state of Indiana to be able to access that information. Our school budget is on there, so if you wanted to look at the school budget from the 2026 school year, you're able to go on Gateway and be able to see the budget as well. So again, it's an informational piece for the state of Indiana. You're welcome.
Greg, based on any preliminary calculations you could do you know if we're able to increase the levy by 10%, what's the expectation of the reduction from circuit breaker? Are we going to end up with like a net 7, or do you have
Yeah,
any
and
idea
I
of
need to
that?
take a look at that more closely as the more details that have come in. And that's one of the first things I do take a look at, because again, what is set for a levy, as far as what you can anticipate as far as revenue is concerned, we have to be very cognizant of that as again, we set the budgets and we look at what's the revenue source going to be. So yes. There's one other mention that I want, and it's not to do anything with the rates, the net assessed valuation, nor is it with a maximum levy growth quotient, but just to mention the fact that preliminary numbers have us, again, this is early in the game, and we wouldn't know specifics or as far as certification is concerned for our ADM or average daily membership. But as it stands early on right now, we're looking just about 200 students more associated with the ADM than we were last year. But again, all of that comes into consideration when you start to calculate out the education fund. You're welcome.
Are there any other questions for Dr. Hunt? All right. I don't know, are we, yeah, what screen is that on? Oh, yeah, can you let me on? I'll use mine. So are you on Airtame 1? I apologize, I thought I could just connect. Put it on Airtame 1, yeah, that would be great. There you go. Oh, that's all right. Oh, it said a number right there. It didn't, it started to show me, is that, say 1? Yep. Hang on. It showed the number for a second, and then it didn't come up. I apologize. Let me see what we have here. I might have to come up there and, oh, there's Airtame 1. Let's see. Okay, that's all right. 2164. And then I don't know if you can get this up on the screen or a split screen. There we go. So we'll get the other two screens. That's not critical. This will guide our conversation. I just wanted to give the board and others an update on our referendum. And so that'll be over there. Hopefully you can, my microphone's on. Some of this you may have seen. There are a few updates, and I might ask Dr. Hunt to weigh in with what he just said on some. Obviously, we believe excellent schools lead to excellent communities. I've talked all the time. It's really important that how we talk about schools defines how others will talk about schools. So we're always here to have a conversation about the job we're doing and how we support families and communities, our families and students and our staff, and then also our community. A couple things with the start of school, if people didn't see, we have a news and features on our website. I could click on that. I'll show you later because I'll go to the website. We put out a back to school video that we got a lot of great feedback on. And then the U.S. News and World Report ranked the top high schools in Indiana. We were 9th on that list, 6th in traditional public schools. So we're very, very proud of that. And then we've talked about this before, but our class of 2026 exemplified the Westfield way. They demonstrated what it means to be both excellent today and life ready for tomorrow. And just highlighting those things from commencement back in May. And just a shout out to them as they begin. If many of them, their college career experienced, or if they've entered the workforce or the military, once a rock, always a rock. So know that we're here cheering for you. So I'm giving you some updates by the numbers. So we ended the year with 10,424 students. Remember, that was not an October count. That was at the end of the year. So our October count, I believe, was 10,315. So throughout the year, we grew more than 100 students. And then we're starting this year approaching another 100 students, but about 200 more than we were last October. And Dr. Hunt just mentioned that. Our families have gone over 8,500 that we serve. And again, it's important to remember, I like to remind people, we're in a state that supports choice when it comes to schools, and 8,547 families choose Westfield, Washington as their school district of choice. And again, we take that responsibility very seriously. So our staff, we don't have the numbers. Henry's, we did our first payroll of the year last week. Henry's working on that, but we expect that number to be close to 1,700 staff members as a result of not only our growth, but opening our 2 elementaries and restructuring. As we firm that up, I'll let you know. We still have 16 facilities, our early learning center. We now have 8 K through 5 elementary schools, 1 middle school, with the second one opening in 2027. Our high school, I should have said our transportation center is now open. We cut the ribbon on that. We're remodeling our operations center, but we have 2,630,000 square feet under roof and counting. Again, I like to say that's about more than 1.5 Lucas Oil Stadium and 7 Grand Park event centers that we care for. 593 acres of property, and we now have updated, just with the value, our property, community assets is about $1.5 billion that we care for in this community. And then we are adults with students in our schools, in our township, and you just saw the census that we grew, I think 20,000 in 5 years, but we have more than 16,000 adults in this community with students in our schools. And that represents, it's a little more than 40% of our taxpayers. We had the opportunity, Dr. Hunt and I, to go hear Dr. Larry DeBoer and Marcia Bohannon to go hear Dr. DeBoer. He is an economist and professor emeritus from Purdue University and considered the resident expert on property taxes in Indiana. And he talked to us in June. And what he said to us is property values will continue to increase while school revenue growth slows and even declines. That's because of Senate Enrolled Act 1. That legislation does not lower the assessment of your property or your property values. Matter of fact, if you got an assessment, you understand that fundamentally went up based on the market. But what this legislation does is actually adds credits and deductions that lower the taxable value of your income. So why the value goes up, it's very confusing. You get an assessment, you think the value went up, you're probably going to pay more taxes under Senate Enrolled Act 1. That may not be the case because they're going to give you deductions, unfunded, he used the word intentionally, unfunded deductions and credits, because there's no way to make up for that in our funding as a school district and the city's funding as a municipality. So the revenue, these are his quotes kind of from his presentation, become more pronounced each year through 2031. And he said it, operating referendums become increasingly important for districts facing enrollment growth, rising operating costs, and state funding limitations, because traditional property tax base will decrease or grow much more slowly. So what I would say to you, this is again from who I consider the best economist in our state, who knows more about funding schools and property taxes. He said enrollment growth, rising operating costs. Our buses in the last 5 years have doubled in cost. Our fuel is going over $5, and we are benefiting from the relief from the tax on fuel, but that will go away, and those costs will be passed on to us, right? So we have those operating costs and then state funding limitations I'll talk a little bit about. So I've given you the quick history. 2008, the property tax cap bill that was implemented, and people ask me why referendums. We passed our first referendum in 2010 in this district, and it was basically, and ever since has been somewhat, to make up for this difference. Governor Mitch Daniels in 2008 said, and I'm paraphrasing his quote, but it's pretty close, school districts will have to economize more than they ever had, and if they want more than they get, they'll have to go to their communities and ask for more. And many districts like us did that, and we're grateful that we've been supported. but this is the sum total of dollars that were approved through the budget process that Dr. Hunt just talked about that we weren't able to collect. So these become losses or gaps in our funding. So then if you jump through there, so in 2010, we approved a referendum, our community did, at 23 cents. In 16, we renewed it at 20. 17 was the capital referendum. I believe this year it's about 8 cents to pay our mortgage for those bonds. We switched from the education fund, the general fund, to the education fund, the operation fund. That actually, Marcia and I were just talking about this, that actually made things more confusing. It gave us flexibility. But before we had the operation fund, we had a bus replacement fund. We had a capital project fund. We had a transportation operating fund. We had funds specifically for those things, and it was much easier to track and communicate. Giving us this flexibility also then made it more convoluted as we communicate to our community, and we kind of were wishing we had the old days back on those funds, even though we appreciate the flexibility. And we now have settled in on, well, we passed our third referendum, in 2022 at 17 cents, so we were able to drop it another 3 cents. But in 2026, we're going out for our fourth referendum. I'm showing you right now the 33.81 cents. I believe that's the number Dr. Hunt is going to build into the budget this year that we believe we need.
That's correct.
And we originally came out of the gate over 39 cents, and we've backed that up now with his report on the where they certified our net assessed evaluation and what we believe we need from our consultants. And that's what I really want to share with you this evening. So I'll keep going. Again, thank you to our community. We've showed this before, but those operating referendums that were successful and our community supported. And then as we continue on, this is a slide that I show you about state tuition support that we've talked about. This is the money that comes from the state per pupil. Our state likes to say the money follows the student. It's almost accurate because if we have a student move to us from another district, like let's say Washington Township, we don't get all that money. We get the money that our formula says we get. So Washington Township would get more for that student than we would get. And this line shows you that we are below average, significantly below average by 500 and just over, I think, $570 some. And so they averaged in this year, this was 24-25, it's the latest data we had. The state average was $8,554 per student, and we got $7,980. So if you look at this, I've shown the buckets before, state, local, and local. So our education fund, we just comes from the state. We're ranked 24th from last, $574 below average. Why that is important is every new student we get less per average, which means it becomes more difficult for us to compete and stay the course. We have an operations fund that's based on local property tax. Again, Dr. Hunt talked about that. And then we have the operating referendum. So those three funds, these are our approximations that we had for 25-26. And these basically are how we run the district day to day. What I want folks to know is, and if the state would give us significantly more money in the education fund, we could lower the referendum operating fund. If we could not be capped on our operating fund, our local property tax, and not have tax caps and now these credits, we wouldn't need the operating fund. But what we needed this past year was $115 million, and that actually was not enough. We had to move things around and spend a little bit of our reserves because as we grow, that's what we're faced with. And so that's why with Senate Enrolled Act 1, reduction in our revenue through that legislation, we need to do another referendum. Sorry, pushed the wrong button, shut my mic off. I do want to note, since 2022, I've showed this slide before, we prepared 8 years. So we thought that referendum would run through 2030. Right out of the gate in 24, they capped our operating referendum at 3%, which mean in our assessed evaluation grew over 14%. So that cap cost us $1 million we thought we were going to get. They capped it again in 25, not as bad, but we grew more. We lost another 1.7 million. And then now they are going to let us have an appeal, but during the 2025, we had the 4% cap with no appeal in the old language. And so that cost us 831. So we're approaching almost, that's, $3.5, $3.6 million. That in 2022, when we set that, we dropped the rate 3 cents, we thought we were going to get that we didn't get. Here is the two things I highlighted that I really want people to understand about Senate Enrolled Act 1. Again, remember your property values will continue to rise, but what happens is the homestead deduction for your residents goes from 37 to 67. So your net assessed evaluation, what property taxes are figured on, will go down because even as your property goes up in value, there'll be a larger increase in your deduction. And then the homestead residential credit is 10% of your net assessed evaluation. I'll talk a little bit more about that, up to $300. And that is, both of these, property tax benefits for property owners are unfunded for us. So there is no, from the legislators, there's no source to replace this revenue except a referendum. We've showed this before. We're in the, based on the information we just received, we need to update this slide. 2027 will be a little higher, but the projections still stay way below what we have experienced since 2016 in our net assessed evaluation. Remember, net is then removing all the deductions, factoring those out, and then the future credits that come on board in 2027. I put this slide up here as a reminder. In 2022, Dr. Kaiser and Mr. Tom Michael showed that middle slide and said, we're below state funding about $4.4 million. Our circuit breaker loss is expected to be $5.3 million. And what they said to us was, we need 8 or 9 million in this referendum. That's what 17 cents will do. So fast forward 4 years, exact same formulas with legislation and where we are, growth, because as we get more kids below average, that number goes up. That number has grown to 14.865 or $5 million. Again, that's why we're here today. That's not what we were projecting in 2022, but because of legislation, that's the world we face. This is really just the 8 years of the referendum. The orange and the light blue show you the impact of the deductions. I made a new chart, try to make it like the circuit breaker loss. So these two work together. These are all projected. So as you get increased deductions, you also then change the circuit breaker in your 1% cap, right? And you get a homestead credit. So our policy analytics went parcel by parcel and gave this estimate to us. And so you can see, if you even go back to this slide here, we're at circuit breaker for 26 this year at 9.2 million, and we're projected next year to be with both of those at 10.3. So you have to add them both up now, is what I'm saying. Next year is the first year of the homestead credit. So that is the 8 years that we're talking about in the referendum. the projected impact or loss we'll see from this legislation. So a yes vote, we have said, is for excellence. That's school safety, a highly trained resource officer in every school, more school counselors and social workers, increased student supports, and maintaining a small class size. We know the key to our success, right, is our teachers. We feel like we do a great job of creating a culture of joy, purpose, and belonging, and that's how we retain and attract our teachers. Dr. Baldwin could talk to you all night about how we select teachers and replicate that culture that is a key to our success. But we also haven't kept pace. Our current starting pay for our teachers is $46,000. And a recent report I just looked at in the central Indiana area has the average around 50,000 and above, and they expect it to be 52. Just addressing that would be over a 10% increase in our salary scale. So we have to set aside dollars to address that. Again, if the state is not going to do it, then as a local community, I believe we owe it to our educators to take action. The other benefit of a yes vote, a higher property values. You can try to have a conversation with me, but people move here because of our schools, and that drives the value of properties up. And as people move here for our schools, it also creates a vibrant, supportive community. Our parents in our community support our schools. We feel it every day. We have great families, great students, and that helps us replicate the Midwestern values that we're proud of and we want to protect. So ultimately, I wanted to break this down. School safety, how do you keep kids safe? Well, first of all, we believe having a highly trained SRO in every school. And that means school resource officers who are educators, informal counselors, mentors, and law enforcement officers. They're a part of the daily life of the school. Currently, we have great SROs, but they also have other responsibilities, and they get called away. Our community needs them. We want them to serve the entire community. That's the way it's currently set up. But we have been working for 5 to 6 years to get to this level. We haven't been able to get it done. It's time to get it done. We need 13 officers, 2 sergeants, 1 lieutenant. We currently have 7 officers and 1 lieutenant, right? And so that's a big shift. The other thing I'll talk about in the next slide is currently the city of Westfield and the police department pick up the majority of that cost, almost all of it. And I believe with the shift in the legislative process, it's time for us to consider paying our fair share. More caring adults is how you keep kids safe. You want to keep kids safe, you have school resource officers who are ingrained in the culture of the school, and then you surround kids with more caring adults. And it takes resources to do that. To keep class sizes small, to have more counselors and social workers who work with kids in the classroom and outside of the classroom to help them meet their needs so they're learning ready. We need that. Our numbers are too high. Our counselors to student ratio is too high. I believe we only have 2 social workers in the district, and we're approaching 10,000 or over 10,500 students. And then increased student supports. We've currently been able to provide some student supports with agreements and partnerships with our local resources, but we've used grant dollars to do that will dry up. And so we are looking for stability in this area. Legislation has made our budget unstable, and our teachers and our kids deserve stability, and that's what this referendum means to them. I want to talk to you about this. So school safety, $2,400,000 is what's going to cost us. That's 80% of the cost. We've already talked with Chief Keene, Mayor Willis. They're willing to talk 80-20. We keep them 10 months. They have them for 2 months, kind of a break. These are rough numbers, but these are actual numbers. Currently, the cost that I showed you for those officers is $1.6 million to the city. They that they invest for our school resource officers. If we pass this referendum, we're looking at picking up 2.4. That 1.6 could be repurposed by the police department, maybe the fire department, I don't know. But, public servants to reinvest in our neighborhoods, in our community, and they're currently in our schools. And we're appreciative of that, but we think that needs to change. Counselors and student supports, we need approximately $2 million to right that ship. To retain and attract high-quality educators, we need about $5.5 million. All of these dollars work together, but someone asked me to break them out. What's this referendum paying for? So that's what I'm doing in this. That's not even, when I told you 10% of our budget, $5.5 million, right, is not 10%. So even if we're putting that into raises, we're still going to have to be very strategic in how we do that. And we still will need help from the state to continue to give us raises in their annual process that they do through the education fund. We opened 2 new schools this year. We're opening a new middle school next year. We have estimated right now with those new staff we've hired to be about $1.2, $1.3 million. We think that will happen again next year with the middle school. We want to recoup that $2.5 million that we don't really have in our funding. And so I've put that in the number. And then finally, we have blown through, I already said, over $4 million or about $4 million in reserves. I think our finance committee and our CFO would say to us, we need to set some of those dollars aside for reserve. If we get that where we needed to be, that annual process of setting the rate for referendum could go down because we've rebuilt those reserves. That's not an every year thing. That's okay, let's see how we did this year. What do we need for next year? But that is a result of the changes that happened after the last referendum that had us we were in a good spot. That's why we lowered our rate and then we had to spend it. So it's a total of about $14 million, which is roughly doubling where we are now. I'm not going to hide from that. Now this is a hard slide to see, but we originally set the 3941 that you will see on the ballot. We can't change that now. And if you remember, we went through this process and we said we're going to select the lowest of the worst year, which was 0.3941. What we are telling you now is in our budget, we're going to take the lowest of that first year at 3381, and that will generate the revenue we believe we need to do what I just showed you on the slide. So I'm now going to give you figures based on that number as opposed to 3981. Okay? So the first thing you need to, this is really a lot of numbers here. First column is what you're currently paying if your home is assessed at those values. Remember, the average home value in our district was certified at $426,700 by the Hamilton County Auditor. We had to round up on the ballot question to $450. So with the 17 cents, this is the projected monthly tax you would pay at those different levels. We would replace that. We wouldn't go on top of it. So the 3381 that I just told you about would replace that. That is almost double. So you can see in column number 2 what that new projection would be for the monthly impact. And then the third column would say that's the difference. So I'm just subtracting the second column from the first column. So those would be the increases that you would experience if this referendum passes. I move those to a net increase, okay, in the, fifth column? So an annual increase. So when people start talking about on the ballot where it says $800, it's not $800, it's actually $405. That's just a legislative snafu in the ballot question that's misleading. But I'm going to go one more. Remember those credits that I told you about? Every one of these homes is going to qualify for a credit in 2027, 10% of their net assessed evaluation. So that projected residential annual credit, that's what they will get refunded on their tax bill next year that they're currently not getting refunded. If I factor that in, the net annual impact of what you're paying more than you are paying today based on that first column is in the first green column, and then I've made that by month. So the actual impact in an increase. Now, I understand people have told me that their assessment has gone up, right? We're trying to have our calculators be as the most accurate they can be. I'm using real-time data from today and projecting it to next year. And so this is as accurate and as transparent as we can be in this moment. But again, what I would say to you, the actual impact on the ballot should be about $164.26 is what we're asking for. I just threw this slide in here. This is current realities of the referendums in our county and our neighbor. So here in the first column, this is based on their 2026 budget order. Dr. Hunt talked about how you can get that. You actually asked about the website. We went to that website, pulled this information. So their current rate, you can see ours is 17. This is everyone's current rate, okay? What that rate generated for them in their budget is on the screen. Remember I showed you ours was 13.7 something, 13,000,007. That's what everybody else has generated for them. So you can see in referendum dollars what each district got this past year. The next column was our enrollment last year. Remember we told you ours was 10,315? And then I did a division and said, what is the referendum dollars per student that each district is getting? And so that is this in 2026, based on referendum per student, what each district gets that their community has said yes to. Why I show you this is Carmel and Noblesville both have a safety referendum, and they have school resource officers in every school every day. All these districts do. But what I'm showing you is in real-time data, why we haven't been able to get there is because we're generating, way less in the referendum dollars than our schools are. So it's not, we can't compare, right? Because this is a comparison. And so looking at this data, this is why, that we're asking to not only replace the 17 cents, but to increase it. I do want to just go on record. I don't know that, no vote or not voting reduces school safety and supports, means more students per adults. We would have to talk about a hiring and salary freeze. Class sizes would increase. We'd have to reduce services. We'd have to reduce operating costs. One of our biggest operating costs right now is transportation. Marcia ran the numbers for me. Transportation operating has gone up 52% since 2021. So it is increased in cost. If we have a no vote, then we're going to have to address that. We've been fortunate in our community. We've had successful referendums. So the only place I could find was data that had an unsuccessful referendum in 2011 was Avon Schools. And in 2011, we talked about this earlier this evening or today, their state ranking on all state tests was 19. And after that failed referendum and increased class sizes and less caring adults serving students, they dropped to 55. And at that point, their school board and community said enough's enough. And they passed a referendum. They renewed that referendum last November. And you can see this is actual data that says that resources pushed into the classroom matter. Now, Scott Wyndham, who is their superintendent, and I work together, and Scott told me I could share this. This is his daughter who was in kindergarten's class, I believe in 2012. You see there 2013 on the bottom. She was in kindergarten before after the failed referendum. There were 29 students in her kindergarten class. And after they passed a referendum, and what we currently live today is the yellow box. So in Westfield, thank you to our community because our kindergarten lives in the yellow box. But a failed referendum means you're going to have to go outside the box because you have to reduce operating costs. I just share that with you. I had a conversation with Scott, and he said, here's how I kind of got that point across, and you ought to try to use that too. Here's the question. So we've just told you that the 39 cents, 39.41 is no more accurate. We're projecting, or we will have the board adopt in the first, in our regular board meeting, I believe was the schedule. Dr. Hunt told us the budget, which will be 3381. Everyone knows the 38 million was a number. We said, what should we come up with? It's the maximum. We kind of just set it at 38. We're predicting 27 to 28 or 28 million, 27.7, 28 million. I actually just put the 14 million in the 13.7, but since it's almost doubled, we should probably just round that up to 28. But it's about 28 million is what we're trying to generate. And then the average home, 450,000, we had to round up, 873. Again, it's actually with the tax credit, $164.25, not $873, and that's $13.69 more, an increase per month for this replacement referendum. Wow. Things that we have done lately to reduce cost over the just last couple years that I have been in this role, we're trying to do it, I guess, well, let's say January of 2025, that's when we really started to talk about it. The board named me superintendent, right? We brought Greg on board. We're doing a lot of this, but these are just things that I want to go on record to show. I'm not going to go through every list, but I wanted to note to try to reduce and improve our efficiency, live within our means, if you will. That approval of we've even talked about transition from trimesters to semesters. That's a big deal. But we believe it was the right move because it will reduce operating costs in 27, 28. And if that pans out, we'll lower the rate for the referendum because we'll see those actual results. We are now, instead of saying we're going to keep 17 cents for 8 years, we're going to say each year the board will adopt the rate we believe we need based on the data we have. This projecting out 8 years in legislative changes has created instability that we have to try to counter. What can you do right now if you're in our community? What I see is in 2023, the legislators passed a bill that said we needed civics education, 6th grade through 12th grade. They said when they passed that bill, they were appalled and alarmed at the lack of engagement and low voter turnout. In this community, right now, our data shows us that only 50% of our parents are registered voters. I think that's actually pretty good, but I want 100%. We have till October 5th to get people registered. It is not only their civic duty, it's their responsibility. It's their right and their responsibility to be informed, to be engaged, and to make their voice heard and let us know what they think about the job we're doing. That's it. And you know, I love this picture. Even though it was the start of school in 2025, this is and they did a fabulous job getting us up and running. Just finished day 5 of the school year, but our teachers and our staff are the foundation of the excellence we have in this community. And so I think we owe it to them. And at that, I'll take any questions you have.
You said it's too late to change the verbiage on the ballot, so that's the deal.
Yes, we had to have it certified. You had to pass a resolution, I think, before July 1. And then it's gone through the process and it's been certified, it's on the ballot. I'm trying to find out if it's gonna be at the top of the ballot. Kathy, I'll reach out or at the end, I'm hoping it'll be at the top of the ballot right out of the bat. But we'll see how they're putting those together. Early voting begins in October. We'll push that out when it happens, but right now, being registered to vote is the most important thing, and checking that. And, you know, obviously, if you know somebody who wants us to come talk to them, they have questions, we have a great website. I told you I was going to do that. Thanks for reminding me, Bill. So if you go to our website and you go to community, there's Excellence Schools, Excellent Community link. You click on that. So we are trying to simplify. I had actually a city council member tell me this was too complicated. But what I want to put in here is I'm going to put in here 450,000, and because I want to go down here and show you that the $229 check that I had in there that you're going to receive, that's how you figure out. It doesn't show up very well, but your total net assessed evaluation, you get 10% of that back in a check. So 10% of 229,000. But you can see right there that this home, right, with that assessed, its net assessed evaluation because of deductions is only 229,000. So the value that going back, the value's there, and then you'll see each year that value actually drops. Now we do increase. It's a modest increase in the value of the home each year. So you can see, as Dr. DeBoer said, the value continues to increase, but the taxing liability goes down. So actually, in year 2031, that 10% is only $179.
So it's gonna show on the calculator the .39, because that's what our verbiage says.
Yes, but our consultants are working with one that shows the 3381. We just don't have it up and date because we just kind of settled on that this week. And so they are behind the scenes creating, and they're going to try to simplify it because this one, obviously, this is based off the DLGF's version. That's what they used, and we told them it's
Could it just be a button showing what they paid in 26 and then what they will pay in 29?
we'll ask them if we can do that. That's a great question, Amber.
Because, I mean, most people are getting this in their escrow account or however they're.
Right. Yeah, and I'm not even sure, Greg, do you know if they know how that credit is going to be extended? Have they even figured that out yet? Yeah, so I talked about at the beginning the news and feature portion of the website that we're really trying to key it up today. So you can see that's where we were featured on the Today Show. I write, you know, my community letter, the financial dashboard that we have updated. You can also then search for this. So if you wanted to see, you know, by high school, then it tells you those news and features by the high school. If you just wanted the Early Learning Center, those press releases and so forth, or you can go all. So again, this is a great source where we push out the latest information. But then you can also, again, we launched this financial dashboard. So click on that and you can see that through our certified budget. That certified budget does include debt service. I didn't talk about debt service in our presentation, but that's part of the overall budget. But Dr. Hunt and Craig Tierney worked to put this together based on feedback and questions we had from the community around they wanted these, to be able to dig into this information.
So I know you've already got some presentations scheduled coming up. Is it gonna be a shortened version of what you just showed us?
Yeah, so we are working on, Craig, I did a presentation on Saturday, and so what we did from that presentation was we recorded it, and we actually took some feedback about what radiated with people. And so we're looking at trying to get to about a 20-minute presentation and then answer your questions. And then what Craig wants to do, what tonight was part of, is we'll probably record bits and pieces from this. So if you think about a recording of me saying, here's a history on school funding, I'll go through it one more time. It'll be a video. You want that, go to the video. Don't hear me say it again. So we're going to chunk it, if you will. That's a great learning strategy. We'll chunk the presentation. Then we'll just drill down to what we think people want in those presentations and answer questions. We are, again, there is a process, right, that is a campaign part of this. And so as we wanted to get the school year up and started, and so we will be working on that side of things. Obviously, the folks at this table can talk about it legally and even during the workday, but the majority of our community cannot, or our school district employees cannot. And so we don't want to blur that line with them. And so we've tried to reach out to them and say, here's how you keep yourself informed. And when we kick off that, we'll have a separate website with information that we believe legally they say we can't have on our website. But most of this is just us trying to be transparent. So if there are any other questions, I'd be happy to address them, or we can wrap up.
I just want to reiterate what Amber said as a consideration maybe for a really great, meaningful takeaway slide for folks to see what did you pay this year and what would you pay next year, just as a quick hit so that they could easily see it looks like it's $13 a month, and because that's what a lot of people budget from and would be very helpful.
Yep, I agree with that. I also think, again, just in the feedback from folks who I believe are really connected and informed, who have asked to meet, or I've connected with, that the assessment that came out recently and the property tax that it's a year later, right? And Dr. Hunt could go through when a house is built. Go ahead, just go through it real quick.
Sure. I mean, obviously, there is a timeline in which the assessment takes place. So for instance, if you build a house, you move into that house prior to that assessment date, let's say March 1st is the deadline. And so what you have to wait is an entire year for that assessment then to come on board. And then from that assessment, then you have to take a look at the additional time in which it takes to then actually collect on that property tax. And so it's great that we have the growth in the district, and we're very thankful to have the students. But again, we're kind of behind and lagging behind as far as that funding source is concerned. So those are the things that obviously we have to really keep in mind as a growing district. And again, to be solvent and be very fiscally responsible in what we do, but again, there is a disadvantage to that timing of being able to collect that property tax.
So to Mrs. Willis's point, you just got information on paying your taxes, then you get an assessment. You don't pay on that assessment till next year.
Correct.
Next year, you have the next phase of Senate Enrolled Act 1. It's almost impossible to help people understand that what you paid this year, that assessment that doesn't apply till next year.
Correct.
And then the legislation in there. So just saying, here's what you paid this year, here's what's projected next year with the average assessment. I don't know that I can get the assessment of everybody, but then the average impact of that deduction, and just simplify it. Because even the calculator provides way too much information for the average
Yeah,
person.
yeah.
I think being informed on my the slide I had, right, could be simplified. How does it impact me? Right? If
Yeah.
you just had that,
Right,
and then you vote that way, that's being informed.
yeah,
And so how can we provide that for people? All righty,
thank you.
you're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? All right, well, before we adjourn, I want to thank everyone who joined us this evening and appreciate the thoughtful discussion and work that goes behind preparing for for these sessions. If there's no further business to come before the board, this work session is